This is Stephen Swan. His birth date is January 10th, 1986, and he served in which war?
I served in the Iraqi War.
Okay.
Two major conflicts, which were Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was the first kind of the first push of the war, and then Operation Enduring Freedom, which was after the war ended, and that was when we're trying to spread democracy. It's a weird peacekeeping mission.
Okay. And what was your branch of service?
I was in the Navy.
Okay. And you grew up in Fenton, Missouri?
Yes, I
right?
did.
And so were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted for reasons unbeknownst to me at the time. I think everybody at that point in time, at some point in their career has they question why they joined. Probably getting yelled at, or on deployment for 7 months, and you're just wondering, why did I do this?
Okay, so if you could have gone to college instead, because you joined when you were 18.
Yes.
So looking back, if you could have joined, why didn't you go to college? Why did you join the Navy?
It was a financial thing. I did not do well in high school. That was my own personal choice, though. And I saw the movie Top Gun, and that's what I wanted to do. From the time I saw that movie, from the time I was like 9, I wanted to work with planes. I wanted to do that. So, I think that was my mentality through high school. I didn't care because I knew I was going to join the Navy.
Okay, and you were still living in Fenton at the time?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and where were you living, at home?
I was living with my parents.
Okay, and you already kind of talked about why did you join, but at that time, why do you think you joined? When you were 18, what made you finally say, I'm going to join the Navy?
I just wanted to get out and do my own thing.
Why the Navy? Why not the Army or the Marines or the Air Force? Why the Navy?
Well, Navy's got a lot of cool things. The Navy is the Navy. Everybody knows the Navy. I love the uniforms. I love the mentality. I love the boats. I love the planes. I guess it was just more of a crapshoot, but the Navy recruiter was the first one I saw.
Okay. So do you recall your first days of service?
I do. I was scared out of my mind. It's different when you're a troublemaker in high school or anywhere else in your life, and you just got somebody yelling at you, and you can just get up and walk away. Whatever. I quit. In the Navy, you can't quit. You got somebody yelling at you. It's for real. You can't just get up and I quit, walk away.
What do you mean yelling at you?
No,
your first day.
First day, that'd be boot camp.
Well, before you left, you were nervous about boot camp. Did it meet your expectations when you got there?
It blew my expectations out of the water. We started in St. Louis. That was where we met up, and then we drove in a van up to Chicago. That's where Great Lakes is. That whole drive, my stomach was in knots. And literally, you get off the bus, and it's just, you got people yelling at you from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, 24/7.
What do you remember about your instructors?
Oh, my instructors. They were just the epitome of like the Navy sailor when I saw them. I think that's part of the screening process. You got to look like a sailor, and these guys were just, if you could think of like the old school sailor, that's what these guys look like. They were just.
So did you hate them? Did you admire them? Did you?
I hated them at the time. I hated them at the time. I think everybody hates their instructors at some point in time. But now, I probably have the utmost respect for them.
Do you think after boot camp you were changed? Do you always hear about that? Like you go into boot camp, a boy, you come out a man, or whatever?
I think there's always lessons to be taken away from, certain lessons like that. But I think for the most part, I guess yeah. I guess I grew up a little bit, but I think the rest of my career was me growing up versus just that little stint. I think that was the start of the change.
What do you mean growing up? Why do you think that your service made you grow up?
I left when I was 18. I came back when I was 25. Mentally, I think I'm a lot older than that because of the things I've seen, the things I've done. I think in my peer group, I'm more mature. I think I'm more equipped to take on life's challenges.
Okay, and then let's go back to boot camp for a minute. So you got sick in boot camp, right?
Yes.
And what happened?
I had fevers, coughs, colds. I mean, it was pretty hairy a couple times, but
And you ended up actually getting pneumonia, right?
yes, I did. Probably not the best place to get pneumonia because they don't care.
That was going to be my next question. How did the Navy take care of you when you were sick?
They give you some Motrin, and they just send you on your way.
So no sick bay?
No sick bay, nothing like that. They, I guess they just don't beat you as hard. And when I say beat you, they don't physically beat you. It's just, you're working out. You're working out a lot harder, and you're running a lot farther, run a lot harder.
So you're taken away from home and all of this, and you go into boot camp and missing your family, first time away from your family, friends, know that you're going to be in for 4 years. How do you get through it mentally? What do you remember about making it day to day?
That's just it. You go day to day. I didn't focus on the time I was getting out. I didn't look at it as, okay, now I've got 4 years left. I just looked at it, okay, what's tomorrow going to bring? What's tomorrow going to bring? Or what's my next duty station going to do? I started in Great Lakes and went to Florida. That was enough to keep me going, especially going to Florida. It was great. And then from Florida, by the time that, you start wondering, what am I doing in here? Why did I do this? You rotate somewhere else, and it's just constantly evolving.
In boot camp, a lot of friends were made. Did you all kind of help each other out, lean on each other? Did you find that brotherhood?
Yeah, it's it's very interesting because you go in and everybody wants to be themselves, and you put 40 guys in a room that don't know each other. For 1 week, nobody talks to each other. I don't know you. You don't know me. Stay away from me. And by the end of it, you're probably the best friends you'll ever have in your life. Okay. It's weird.
Okay, so we already talked about this, but we're going to talk about your experience a little bit. You served in, you can talk about the wars, or the war that you served in.
Yes.
And where exactly did you go?
I was in the Persian Gulf. At any given time, no more than probably 150 miles off the coast, probably closer to 100 miles. And that's what we did. We flew missions into the country and, supported all the guys on the ground. That was our mission.
So go into a little bit more detail about you supported the guys on the ground. What was you're talking about when you were actually on deployment?
Yes.
And what ship were you on?
I was on the USS Harry S. Truman.
And what was your job? What was your position?
My job, I was...
What's the official title?
This is going to be a long one.
Okay.
I am an aviation electrician's mate, 3rd class.
Okay.
However, my duties on the boat are far beyond just simple electrician. I'm a safety observer on the flight deck. I also launch and recover planes on the flight deck, and I am also the guy that says go. The last person to hit the button to launch a plane off the deck. I give the final thumbs up.
And you mean final thumbs up as, what do you mean by that? Like,
there'll be a team of 2 guys. The jet will taxi to the catapult and be fully armed, ready to go. And me and another guy will once over the jet one more time, make sure there's nothing wrong with it, and we give our thumbs up, and that jet is good to go. Takes off, flies its mission.
When you say fully armed?
It's bombs, missiles, whatever it needs to have.
And you were the kind of the last person to look over that plane and say.
The last guy.
Okay, that's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
And when was your first tour?
My first tour
How old
was.
Were you?
I was 21.
21.
21. That was in. Pretty sure it was 08 and 09.
And what was your experience like? Whenever you first got on the ship,
Okay.
The very first tour, because I know you had 2 deployments. The first time you went, where were some of the places that you got to see?
Oh, our first tour, we pulled into a few different places. Pulled into Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Pulled into Greece, France, Italy. Greece is by far my favorite, though.
Why was it your favorite?
It's just, if you could think of like an old fishing town in a picture. I mean, the boat anchors out, and they have smaller boats come get you because we can't pull in because the water's shallow. And you come around this little sound, and it's just like a picturesque fishing town. They drop you off right in the middle. And
how did these other countries treat the soldiers when they came into their country?
For the most part, it was all positive. I mean, you're always going to have, especially on a foreign port, somebody that's negative. You're gonna have negative groups, but I think the good people far outweigh the bad.
And were you allowed to dress in your attire or
No, we're
your
not.
uniform?
No.
No? And why do you think they have that?
So we don't stick out. But sadly, I mean, we are American, and we stick out like sore thumbs anyway. But, rule number one is blend in. And we try and blend in the best we can. If you're in an American uniform, you're not blending in.
So why do you have to go to Greece? Why do you have to go to Italy? Why do you pull into these certain ports?
It's coalition. It's, goodwill. Pull in and say, hey, we're out here. We're protecting everybody. On top of protecting the people on the ground, we're also just maritime, servitors.
And so you have you were on the aircraft carrier.
Yes.
And the aircraft carrier, tell me about your battle group. Tell me about the different ships that go along with you and the sub.
Oh, the battle group. In our battle group, I can't remember exactly, but we probably had anywhere from 2 or 3 cruisers, some destroyers, subs, mine hunters.
Tell us about the sub.
You never see the sub. The sub is always with the carrier. No matter where it goes, the sub's always there. It's kind of the last line of defense. The whole point of the battle group is to support the carrier. And without the carrier, there'd be no battle group. So it's kind of an eerie feeling knowing that you're surrounded by other ships that would, that are there to protect you because your job is so vital. So
on either one of your deployments, did you ever see any combat?
Combat directly, no. My first deployment, I spent 27 days on the ground in Afghanistan. Didn't see any combat there. We were there more for one of our planes had went down, and we needed to send a rescue jet to get it fixed. So, they sent me there. I was armed. You land, they give you a gun, and they give you a flak jacket, and they say, be careful, you can't leave. But, I think we're far enough, behind the lines that we're safe from any kind of attack. But as far as direct combat, no. But I've seen planes launch off the flight deck with bombs, come back with none. That to me is combat.
No, that is absolutely combat.
That is me doing my job. Mm-hmm. So.
And that's why I think it's so interesting about interviewing someone who necessarily was like a Marine or that is a ground soldier that has the gun, but that is doing that. And then here's someone who has just as much responsibility in this war just by being able to launch a plane and being in charge of something like that. So how do you feel about that?
It's
knowing that that was your plane that you launched, and now it has come back without any missiles. Knowing where it went,
it's empowering. I joined the military. That's the military's number one job is to bring war. That's what we do. Bring it to the bad guy, and when you fix a jet and you have to launch it off the flight deck with bombs and it comes back empty, you saved lives on the ground. I saved Marines' lives. That's how you have to look at it. The pilots always say, the pilots that fly, that the sailors are the weapons. They are just the tools to get the weapons to the ground. That's how they explain it to us. Because without us, they couldn't do their job.
Right. So I know you didn't ever see any direct combat, but on either one of your tours, was there ever any casualties?
Casualties of war on my deployments, no. There were casualties of stupidity.
Explain that.
I hate to say stupidity, but it's just drunken sailors in port. You get a little too rambunctious, and you think you're Superman. Jump off a bridge into a river, and you just don't come back up. That's the only casualty we had, and I say that's a casualty of stupidity, and I mean it in not the bad way, but it's not war. It's just personal choice. That guy lost his life.
So how was that when you went into port and all the guys had been at sea? How long were you at sea, for instance, on certain points?
Without a break,
without seeing
50
land?
days. 50 days.
That's a long time. How do you all I mean, it's got to get a little crazy.
After about 10 days, you start going stir crazy. 20 days, days start blending together. You don't know what day of the week it is, what time it is. I work the night shift. I work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That doesn't mean I work 12 hours. I usually worked 18, 19, 20 hours. There's days you don't see the sun, and there's days you don't see the moon. It's work. But 30 days and you're starting to get at each other.
Well, about your sleeping quarters on the ship when you're gone that long, because how long was your first and second deployment? How many months?
My first deployment was 7.5 months. My second deployment was 8.5 months.
So you're with these guys for a long time.
Yes.
And what is the sleeping arrangements like?
The sleeping arrangements, it's about a room this big, maybe 60 by 60, and it's 100 guys in that room. And it's 3-man bunks, vertical, and you've got maybe a foot, and then you've got another set of bunks, and it's just keep rows like that. It's harsh.
Was there a lot of fighting, a lot of quarrels, or no?
No, there's not a lot of fighting. Everybody's pretty close. There's a lot of camaraderie that, you'll see people mad at each other, but they have to work the next day, so it gets resolved quickly.
Okay. So do you have any memorable experiences, something that really stands out as far as like either one of your tours?
I think cruise itself is a memorable experience. Trying to name something within that cruise is kind of hard because I came off my cruise and I was it's empowering to know that you're able to finish your cruise. I did that. Not a whole lot of people can say that I did 7.5 months on a cruise on a deployment. So I think that in itself is rewarding enough.
Have you ever received any medals or citations?
I do. I have many medals. Some are handouts, and when I say handouts, it's something that everybody gets with time. But I do have a couple admiral flag letter of commendations. It's pretty much some admiral saw you and said, personally, you are doing a great job.
How does that make you feel?
Well, that's awesome. That's something that a handful of people in the Navy get, and that's when an admiral comes out of his way, comes sees you and says, you are what we look for in the Navy. That's awesome. That makes your day. That makes your cruise.
Okay, so I am your sister, so I already know this. But how, when you were overseas, how were you able to stay in touch with your family?
I emailed
and your friends
every day when I could, and we pull into port. All the little local folk, like all the phone companies, they offer plans to in bulk. So we'll have at any time probably 100 cell phones on the pier when we pull in. $20 for a phone card, and they just give you a phone, and you can use your phone there. It's a great service. So
what was when you were on the ship? What was did you have plenty of supplies? How was the food?
Supplies. Nothing arrives quickly on the boat. You have to plan months ahead. If I needed something and something as simple as toothpaste, I had to email my parents or my family and say, hey, I need toothpaste, a month ago. So by the time I was out, it would arrive. As far as food on the boat, food works the same way. It takes a while to get there. So things that have been sitting for a while obviously tend to go bad.
So what does the Navy give you? What do they issue you as far as supplies?
The Navy issues you what you need in boot camp as far as clothing, things like that, toothpaste, shaving cream, razors, all that is on your own. So like I said, you have to plan accordingly and plan general rule of thumb is a month ahead.
And then food.
Food is horrible. But it's the only thing you have to eat, so about a month into it, it becomes a 5-star restaurant. You start every Friday we had seafood day, and it was seafood and steak. It was lobster tail and I think what they called steak. I'm not really too sure, but there's things you look forward to. Somebody will come up from Eaton, into the shop, and they'll be like, hey, we have lasagna today, and you'll see everybody get up and run down to the galley. And there's other days that what they have. Well, they had fried chicken. Nobody will get up. There's things we know to stay away from. There's things we know to get down and eat.
So how did you all entertain yourselves? And were there ever entertainers that came in, or did you get to see a lot of that?
There was a lot of entertainment. I think I'm probably the best spades player in Missouri right about now. We played a lot of spades, played a lot of dominoes. We had computers. We emailed. That's how we entertained each other. We had our shop pitched in and bought a big screen TV, and we'd watch movies just on loop. As far as entertainers, though, yeah, we had quite a few people come out. Jessica Simpson came out. Lady Antebellum came out.
The guys love Jessica Simpson coming out.
She actually got sick from the food, and she couldn't perform. So just a testament to how bad the food is. And then our first cruise, Jimmy Buffett came out, and that was a good time. He bought the entire boat margaritas. So that was an interesting night.
That's funny. So what did you do when you were on leave? Like your first leave, what did you do?
Oh, my first leave was, 2 months after I first got to boot camp. That was, technically my first leave. I only had 3 days off, but, I spent it with family. I think every leave chance you get, I try to make it home twice a year, I spent it with family. Try and catch up with friends.
Did you ever feel like isolated or different when you came home?
A little bit. I think that everybody doesn't always understand, doesn't understand you when you come back.
Do you ever feel like angry at those people, or do you have any idea what we're doing right now?
No, I don't think it's anger. It's just, it's kind of sadness, I guess, All these people you used to know, now all of a sudden they don't know you anymore. It's, you still know them because they're still doing the same thing and all, but to them, you're this completely different person.
Well, I can say that one of my favorite experiences since forever, one of my favorite things that I've ever seen is watching a ship pull into port and watching all of the sailors after 8 months of being out at sea, and all their family and friends are there. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt already, but can you tell me about how the guys are standing and when they pull into port?
Yeah, I'll talk about my first cruise a little more because it was warm. My second cruise, when we pulled in, it was freezing cold. It was probably 15 degrees with a 20, 30 knot wind coming off the pier. It was brutal. But my first cruise, we came back in the summer. It was great. The hangar bay will fit, at max, probably say 12 to 13 F-18s. And that's probably maybe 20 people's worth of space. And there's 5,000 people on the carrier. On pull-in day, you have 5,000 people in the hangar bay, just packed like sardines, and nobody cares. You'll be sitting down there for hours, and nobody cares. You'll see the pier inch, as we're backing in, just inch by inch by inch, and and when they finally get the brows set up, the ladders to get off the boat.
The brows. What are the brows?
The brows are kind of like gangplanks to get off the boat. They drop them on the elevators, and that's how you walk off the boat. But when the skipper finally gets on the loudspeaker on the boat and says Liberty call, that's what he says when, hey, you guys are free to go. After 8 months, it's an awesome voice to hear, and I've never heard any kind of sporting event stadium ever get as loud as 5,000 sailors that have been gone for 8 months in a hangar bay. It is deafening, and it's awesome.
And the guys all stand around the top of the ship?
It's called manning the rails. I did it my first cruise, so I could say I did it. And it's, you're sitting on the flight deck. Around the flight deck, everybody is, standing at attention, parade rest, and and when that boat turns, when the boat turns the sound, and everybody sees the boat and people on the pier, they erupt. I don't care. You could be the toughest guy out there. You're gonna have tears in your eye. Mm-hmm. It's an experience.
How do they decide which sailors get off first? Because this is one of my favorite stories.
For who they get off first, new dads always get off first. I think that's always fair. You always have somebody that says, "Oh, that's not right." We've been out here just as long. No, if you have a son or a daughter that you haven't seen yet, you deserve to get off first. And they also do raffles on the boat. Midway through, and say, "Hey, we'll let you off the boat first. Pay $1 for a raffle ticket for a first kiss." And it's things like that. First hug. it's fun. It's
great. So let me think here. Are you able to still like stay in contact with some of the guys and some of the friends that you've made? Do you think those will be lifelong friendships and lifelong?
You know, I think there's probably things I can tell them that I can't tell anybody else. You know, we've shared everything together. But yeah, you know, I talk to them, you know, some of them daily, you know, others weekly. But you know, Facebook has really helped out on that, you know. But yeah, you know, they're lifelong friends.
So can you tell me any of the like scariest moments you ever had on the ship? Something that
Oh, scariest moments. There's a lot of these. I worked on flight deck at night, you know. That's in the darkest environment, you know, launching, you know, planes that are capable of just leveling cities. You know, and you're dealing with all this and, you know, the pitch black. You can't see anything and you can't hear anything because it's so deafening loud, and from all the jet engines, you don't know if there's one next to you or if it's all the way up to the top of the bow. But my scariest moment was they were retracting the catapults and they're firing no loads. No loads are, they got to test the catapults before they launch a plane, like in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. They're retracting the catapults, and usually they rope them off, you know, with safety observers, say, hey, nobody come over here, we're launching no loads. Well, on this particular night, I guess they didn't get the memo and they weren't up there. The way Cat 3 and Cat 4, the catapults, are lined up, is you have to cross catapult 3 to get to number 4. Well, we were launching a jet on number 4, and they were retracting the catapults on number 3. As I stepped over the catapult to get to the number 4 catapult, it shot out from underneath me. Now, this is capable of launching, you know, a 5-ton plane from 0 to 100 and something miles an hour in 4 seconds. And it missed my foot by inches. So I think that was probably the scariest moment I've had in the Navy.
And did you ever have any, I think you had told me a story once about different, does anybody ever get curious? They see an aircraft carrier, you have other ships out there, you're not the only ship in the ocean.
Yeah.
Has there ever been any encounters like that?
Yeah, we've only been to, you know, they call it general quarters. You know, that's kind of battle stations, like, hey, man your battle stations. Only legitimate once, and that was the Iranian speedboats. And when I say speedboats, you know, it's the Iranian Navy, and this is what cracks me up, is it's a Scarab. It's a 30-foot Scarab with, you know, twin engines. That's their Navy. You know, but they're quick, and they just came out and harassed the carrier. And
how did you all?
You know, they call battle stations, and you've got people manning 50 cals, and all. You know, the battle group sinks in, and they form a tighter net, and it's not somewhere I'd want to be if I was in a 30-foot Scarab.
Well, you were telling me about a helicopter.
Yeah, this is the best part. We launch helos too, which are primarily mine hunters and search and rescue.
And helos are helicopters.
Yes,
okay.
Helos are helicopters, and they also harass other boats. And you know, if somebody gets too close and they don't want to get away, pretty much what the helo will do is they'll put all their prop wash. The prop wash is the helo rotor blades. It's called rotor wash as well, and it'll just downdraft so much air that they can push boats away. And that's what they'll do. They just hover, you know, they'll hover on top of these boats and they just push them wherever they want to go.
Okay. Do you recall the day your service ended? And how you served for how many years? I
served for 7.5 years. I distinctly remember it ending because I didn't want it to. I wanted to finish my 20 years. I wanted to retire. However, you know, due to some new policy and some new way things are being run, it just wasn't a possibility.
What do you mean it wasn't a possibility? And why did you want to stay in for 20 years?
I wanted to stay in for 20 years because, you know, it was easy. I thoroughly enjoy my job. You know, I get satisfaction at the end of the day knowing that I fixed something. Something is broken. You know, I get in, I tinker around with it, and it's fixed.
It's also an F-18, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's not something everybody can say they work on. You know, that guy down there works on a Honda. I work on an F-18. You know, it's a distinct difference.
So when your service ended, you did not want it to?
I did not, no. The Navy has this program now. It's called PTS, called Perform to Serve. Basically, what that does is you put in for your reenlistment, and Big Navy says, well, your job is overmanned or your job is undermanned. We will not allow you to reenlist, or we will allow you to reenlist. So my job is as awesome as my job is, an electrician. Everybody wants to do it because it is. They joke that I'm an AE, aviation electrician. They joke that it's called aviation everything because we do everything. Mechanics works, airframe works, power plant works. Anything, we do it. So that's kind of the jack of all trades, and everybody wants to do it because there's a lot of experience you can get out of it. I just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and I wasn't allowed to reenlist.
So now what? Now what? You had planned on just up until a year ago, correct?
Yes.
Of being in the Navy for 20 years, and now you're not. So now what is the Navy? You've spent 7.5 years in the Navy altogether. And what is the procedure like? What do they do? I mean, do they give you papers to sign? Are you out? Does your insurance end? I mean, how does your relationship with the Navy end?
Your relationship with the Navy doesn't end, just like you quit a job, like, hey, I quit. Okay, whatever. As far as getting out, it was very easy. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult. Basically, all I do is I walk around with a sheet of paper and get signatures from people. And the last person is the commanding officer of your squadron. He says, okay, you're done with the Navy. Sign this. I sign a paper, and that's it. That's the end of my Navy career. Your enlistment doesn't end until 8 years. No matter what anybody says, you spend your first enlistment active, and then you have inactive reserves up until 8 years. So I have 6 months of inactive reserves. As far as insurance, my insurance ends 90 days after my EAOS, which is end of active obligated service, which was actually March 1st. So I have 90 days after that as far as insurance. Now I can enlist in the active reserves and finish my 20 that way. And
would you have to see more cruise time?
I might. It's uncertain. I can't tell you yes or no. It's the needs of the Navy at that point.
Is that something that you're thinking about?
It is. I think I need to do a lot more thinking than I am right now about what I want to do. But I'm just still kind of in shell shock.
Well, also part of the benefits of the Navy are GI Bill.
Yes.
And being able to go to school. Is that something that you
That
think?
is also something I've been looking into, finishing
Why do you think
my
the
degree.
Navy does that?
The GI Bill it's awesome. It's an awesome program, especially now that they've changed it. They pay you to go to school, which I think is a big motivator to get back, and get out in society and do something do something other than having a military background.
So what is your thoughts about the Navy itself? Well, how do you feel after serving? You missed out on college, and
I didn't miss out on anything.
Right. Oh, and that's what I was just going to ask. I mean, some people might have thought, that would have been missing out. But how do you feel about the Navy now? Knowing, I know you can't.
The way I feel,
re-enlist.
everybody else missed out on the Navy. It was the best 7 years of my life. I've met my best friends. I've seen things that other people will never see. I've done things that people will never do. That is a great feeling. At the end of the day, the Navy is great, and I am glad I did it, and I am sad that I'm out.
And how do you think the Navy treats its soldiers and its guys? How do you feel their treatment? It's
very good. I think of all the services, we probably have the best, the best care, the best.
And the reason I asked you that is because I know you were stationed in Nevada, correct?
Yes.
For part-time. And you broke your leg.
Yes.
And what did the Navy do?
The Navy took care of me. Their insurance is primo. It's 100%, no questions asked. I broke my leg, and Navy didn't turn a blind eye. They took care of me 100% and gave me what I needed to do to get better.
So How do you feel, and this is a very general question, but you joined in what year?
In 2004.
In 2004.
Yes.
So that was in the middle of the Iraq War.
Yes.
Correct. How do you feel about the war now? And I know that's a very general question, but
How I feel about the war now?
and you directly, indirectly a part of it, absolutely, and how do you feel, I guess, about the war itself?
My thoughts on the war. I support 100% the guys that are at war right now. I'm sad that I can't be there with them, helping them, but that's how I feel about the war. I support my guys on the ground.
So about the politics itself, you just know that you're in the Navy, you're here to support your guys. The
I don't
politics,
think about that.
you don't think about
I
it.
go where I'm told. If there's people in harm's way, and I can have an impact on whether or not they come home. The politics don't matter. I do my job and make sure that those guys get home.
You might not be able to answer this, but do you think a lot of soldiers share your opinion in that?
I think so. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of sailors, soldiers out there that care about the politics. I personally don't. Whether we're at war or not, I have a job to do. Just like anybody else in any other job. If it's at some point in time you have to say, I don't care about why I'm being told to do this. I just need to do it. And that's the mentality we have. We do it because we need to, because we are making a difference.
Awesome. Okay. So you're officially a veteran.
Yes.
Do you plan on ever joining any veteran organizations?
Yes.
Or?
I'm going to join the VA. It has a lot of benefits, a lot of perks, and it's something that's available to me because I'm a veteran.
Another general question, and we might have covered it, but just your kind of final thoughts of how did this experience, being in the Navy, either change your life or help your life, or I know that's again like a kind of a general question, but what are your final kind of thoughts?
The Navy has made me who I am today. Whether that be for the better or for the worse, I like to think it's for the better. It's who I am. I'll always be a sailor, always.
Okay. And is there anything else you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing everything with us. And, we appreciate your service.
Thank you.
I appreciate your service.
Well, thank you.